Hey, and welcome to the lesson on properties of rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. Rhombuses, rectangles, and squares are considered special parallelograms, and they have special characteristics that we're going to talk about today in this lesson. For example, let's define what a rhombus is. A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. Okay? A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles, or 4 congruent angles. In a quadrilateral, we should know by now that a quadrilateral, the interior angles add up to 360 degrees, and therefore if they were all congruent, 360 divided by 4 equals 90, which happens to be a right angle. Therefore, since they are all right, they are all congruent, and because they are all congruent, they are all right angles. A combination of both a rectangle and rhombus will give us a square. So in the same respect that a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not necessarily a square is also a rhombus, but however, a rhombus is not necessarily a square. If a parallelogram is a rhombus, then its diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So if ABCD was a rhombus, then AC would be perpendicular to DB. So AC would be perpendicular, and this is the symbol for perpendicular. So AC would be perpendicular to BD. And the way you symbolize that is by putting a little square for the right angle. So that means that those angles where they intersect will all be 90 degrees, or right angles. If a parallelogram is a rhombus, then each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So therefore, if we solely look at AC, the diagonal AC, opposite angles are C and A. The diagonals will split those angles into 2 separate but equal angles. So if that happens, if a parallelogram is a rhombus, then that is a property that we can say is true about that quadrilateral. If a parallelogram is a rectangle, then its diagonals are congruent. So we have one diagonal, 2 diagonals. So if AC is congruent to BD, then we can say that the quadrilateral ABCD is in fact a parallelogram. And last but not least, squares. There's no specific theorems for squares, but if we remember, a square is both a both a rhombus and a rectangle. Okay, so therefore it would inquire all 3 of those theorems that we just talked about, which is that the diagonals are congruent, they are perpendicular, and the opposite angles are bisected. That's all I have for you for this lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Make sure you take some good notes. Go back and watch the video if you don't fully understand. Go ahead, try your homework assignment, and meet me in live class where we can talk about this in a little more depth.